I hit the wrong button initially, but we're live now. Hello and welcome to You'll Probably Agree. Today with me is Jeff York from The Establishing Shot, and we're going to talk about a movie that I think is one of Darren Aronofsky's best films, and I think it definitely was a way for him to sort of get his career back on track after The Fountain, and that is The Wrestlers. Jeff, well, I'll start with you. Thanks for coming on. Could you give us a little synopsis of the film and what you thought of it?
Sure. Yeah, I'm a big fan of it. I've always liked Darren Aronofsky, and I think to your very cogent point, it kind of turned it around for him because after this, he kind of started to focus on these sort of individual characters, these sort of tragedies, like with Black Swan and The Whale, and I think he's sort of carved out a niche for himself. We'll forgive him for Noah, which I think was a misnomer and a mess.
Little
but
CGI trees, yeah.
Exactly. But this is a very tragic character study about a character named Randy the Ram Robinson. He is
Yeah.
a former wrestler who is been injured and sort of pummeled into all kinds of pain and problems with his body. And he's also getting older, and he's at this point where I think he's reflecting on all of the things that have gone wrong in his life and where he's sort of now where he's living in a sort of a rented trailer and not much to account for his life. He has no real friends or relationships with anybody. He's kind of living off of his past laurels, going to these sort of mini sort of cons, if you will, where he and other old retired wrestlers sign autograph tchotchkes and souvenirs and such. And he's trying to, I think, find purpose in his life because he really can't wrestle anymore. He's done a little bit of it still, sort of these sort of on the fringy kind of things that are sort of set up and badly done, but he ekes out a little bit of a living doing that. But it causes him to then, I think, take a real sort of assessment of himself and where he is and what he's got left in his life. And that includes connecting with a strange daughter of his, played by Evan Rachel Wood, Stephanie, as well as seeing if he can maybe possibly connect as a boyfriend or lover with, of course, a stripper. And all these guys always think, oh, she really likes me. And, she's a regular customer, but she likes his money, though she does sort of like him and they talk a lot. And she's a little bit of a flirt as well as a therapist, I think, for him. But it's really kind of a sad situation for him on every front, and yet he's trying his best to sort of start over, even though he's probably in his early 50s in this film, and see if he can do something else with whatever life he's got left, because old age is a bitch, and it's not very kind to him, especially in the kind of punishment that he was doing as a wrestler. And he's still abusing his body with various steroids and drugs and stuff like that to just eliminate the pain so he can do these sort of weird sort of exposition matches and stuff like that. But it's very well acted. Mickey Rourke won a number of awards for it.
Mm-hmm.
And was nominated for the Oscar. Kind of came down to neck and neck between Sean Penn and him that year, but Sean Penn won for playing Harvey Milk, which was a terrific performance as well. But it's a very sad and kind of tragic story, but I think it's really a compelling one as well. And to your point, and I love the way you sort of set these up, Mike, it's about so much more than just an old aging wrestler.
Yeah.
It's not Rocky, it's not Raging Bull. It's got pieces of those kinds of stories, some of the narrative to this story as well. But I think it's much more than that. And I think it's really about, well, we'll talk more and more about it, but I think it's about everything from sort of illusions as well as comfort zones, even if they're not necessarily comfortable. And I dare say I think it's about the need for fame and some of these people who want to be on. They want their celebrity, they want their persona to become their real life. And of course it can't, but they don't know that. And that's what we're watching here. And it's moving and hard to sort of watch at times, but I think it's a fascinating character study.
Yeah, it's a fascinating film, especially the way I was introduced to it, and I sent you a link to the trailer, and
Yeah.
I'm just gonna play a snippet from the trailer, but not too much, because it kind of makes you think this movie's gonna be one thing, and then it turns out to be completely something else.
Right,
But
right.
here's the trailer.
This life you can lose everything you love, everything that loves you. A lot of people told me that I'd never wrestle again. The only one who's going to tell me when I'm through doing my thing is you people here.
Now you watch that, you think this is going to be an inspirational story about a
Mhm.
guy
Yep.
who's going to find redemption in his life, and maybe things will work out despite all the things that he may have done that they don't tell you what he's done in the film. And I like the fact that they don't tell you that. But then you
It
see
also
that, yeah.
it also seems to sort of suggest that he's a very self-aware person and
Mhm.
has a good perspective on his life and his fans and career and all that, which he does not in the film. And when he says that at the end, it's almost a last-ditch effort to connect with something that maybe gives him feeling to being a human again, because I think so much of life beats him down and makes him feel very disconnected and very inhumane
Yeah.
and whatever.
Yeah, because when you see the film, and spoilers bannering up here, but when you get to that speech in the film, when you see the context of it in the movie compared to what it is in the trailer, it's completely different.
Yeah.
Because in the film, basically at a certain point, depending on how you interpret it, he decides he's going to end his own life because he's not worth anything to anyone. He's only worth being an entertainer to the fans, but he's not worth being a father. He's not worth being a boyfriend. He's not worth being a husband. So this is going to be his way out. So it's actually like a very disturbing, sad speech when you see it. But in the movie, you think it's inspirational, but that's not the
Right.
case at all. And this movie plays against all those conventions where you think this is going to be a happy film, but this is about a person who's been self-destructive, who ends up continuing to self-destruct. And sadly, in real life, Mickey Rourke is someone who was self-destructive. And this, I remember during the whole Oscars campaign, this was his big sort of catapult back into stardom and to really be a household name again. And then he ended up falling from grace again. And it's very telling. Yeah.
Yeah, it really is. In fact, in some respects, I think the film works on another level where it almost becomes a metaphor for Mickey Rourke's career and sort of his punishment that he was putting himself through with not only, his stint with boxing and some of those waylaid plans that were not the smartest, as well as unfortunate plastic surgeries that were not helped by being pummeled in the ring and sort of aging out of this sort of beautiful leading man, almost a Brando-esque kind of persona that, to your very point, Mike, he never really did anything to capitalize on this. I remember he was in Iron Man 2. That was the big film he scored after this Oscar nomination and this comeback. But what can you cast him in? He's so unusual looking and so otherworldly looking that he doesn't even look like Mickey Rourke anymore. And that played up. That was played well here because Randy the Ram Robinson is not really probably who he once was and what he once looked like too. And, all the puffiness in his face and all that is from being abused and hurt in the ring and just, the boxer's sort of face, if you will, from getting hit. But it was unfortunate that he really couldn't go anywhere after this, but this was a great role and he was fantastic in it. And I think it would have been nice if he'd won the Oscar, but I honestly don't know if much would have been different, even if he had one, because he won a bunch of awards for it, the Golden Globe and other things. And yet, where do you cast him? What do you put him in? I mean, crime thrillers and roles where he plays a tough guy, but that's about it. And even there, he's so unusual looking. It would be hard to sort of make him recognizable as a character on screen, other than in something like this where those abuses to his face and so her whole persona plays and works with the role.
Yeah. I think more than him just being odd looking is the fact that he's difficult to work with, notoriously so.
Right, right.
And I mean, Sean Penn isn't much better. I was really rooting hard for Mickey that year. I thought Sean Penn, because I saw the Life and Times of Harvey Milk,
Yeah, it's a much
and
better film. The
yes,
documentary, because it's just
yeah,
real, and I think you get a little bit caught up in the actors playing these tragic characters in Milk. I think it's a good film. I don't think it's a great one, but at the same time, by honoring Sean Penn, they're kind of honoring Milk just the way they've done that many times with Gandhi or Freddie
yeah.
Mercury and things like that. But I think the better performance was Rourke's, and dare I say, I think the better film was The Wrestler. And I think Aronofsky really directed it well, despite some of the, perhaps, I don't want to say cliches, but things that you might expect it where it would go and different things like that. Of course, he's got an estranged daughter. Of course, he doesn't have any friends. Of course, he's going to all these ramshackle, rooms and schools to, hawk his modest wares and walk out probably with $150 or something, and that's not making the rent on his rundown trailer, trying other jobs. I mean, those kind of things you could almost say, well, I can see them doing that. That's Raging Bull, that's Rocky, that's a bunch of other movies that are kind of in this world of where what does an ex-athlete do? He's got this one skill, and then when he's too old for it anymore, he can't do anything else. However, I think because of the sensitivity of Rourke's performance, as well as the way Aronofsky directs it, it's played very gritty and realistic. If anything, I think it's subdued. There's not any really big screaming, crazy emotion melodrama that you might have expected in another director's hands. I think they would have pushed that, but Aronofsky always pulls it back a little bit more, even in Black Swan, which was ostensibly a very stylized horror film. Large, and Natalie Portman gives a great performance. She's literally going crazy on screen. But it was a very disciplined performance, and I think Aronofsky's a disciplinarian as a director to make sure that it doesn't go too far.
Yeah, and I think when the with the film, it was a very restrained movie from Aronofsky, because like his work before it, he did Pi, which is just like this crazy head trip of a film about
Right.
a guy who doesn't fit in as a mathematician, and like he finds this whole conspiracy. And then there was Requiem for a Dream, which is
Mm-hmm.
one of the most difficult films
Yeah,
for me to
very
watch.
hard to watch.
Yeah, and that's like a huge montage-y, crazy head trip thing. I mean, even The Fountain was a bit of a head trip, like the way
Very
they're
much so.
filming the space sequences where he's in a giant bubble, and how the choice of shots they have, like when they're cutting to like the conquistador, and they have the overhead view of the horse going, and then it goes and the camera goes completely underneath them. This was a film that wasn't stylized. This was a film that was pseudo-documentary. He even hired a French cinematographer who does documentaries to shoot the movie. And it's funny, when I was watching the behind the scenes stuff on the DVD, she's going, "This is nothing like shooting documentary." Like, she was not very happy with it. But yeah, this is a movie that they just kind of gave it this nitty gritty feel to it. And the screenwriter even addressed himself the cliches you were pointing out, where he said, you know, when we came up with the story, we didn't want to have all the cliches. And we know we had the cliches. There was the stripper, there was the estranged daughter. And then it turns out the way this movie happened was, it was originally just going to be kind of about wrestling, because Darren Aronofsky just wanted to make a movie about a wrestler. So when they started going to all these venues, they would find these guys wrestling in front of like 500 people for like $100 a night. And these were guys who were like once really famous and big, and now they're
Mhm.
doing these little venues, and you're like, why are they here? What's going on? And they ended up developing a story with that. Now, the thing that it does with those cliches is that's so different, is that this isn't a story about the rise of an athlete. It's not the rise of Rocky. Even Raging Bull, you see Jake LaMotta rise and get the belt, and then you see his fall. This
Mhm.
movie is all the fall. And it's nothing but that. Like, you think in the middle act, oh, wait, he's going to put things together. The stripper's actually talking to him. They're shopping. He actually does reconnect with his daughter.
Mhm.
And then he screws it all up instantly. And
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I think one of the things that makes it so tragic is, while he is in many ways kind of a gentle giant. I mean, he's
Mhm.
this very sweet person, and even in the scenes where he's with Pam, or as she's known at the club, Cassidy,
Mhm.
uh, played in a very good turn by Marissa Tomei. He's not really sexual with her. He's mostly kind of like a big brother, just talking, friendly. It's funny, for all of his muscles and sort of prowess and sort of this macho man overt masculinity, when he's walking into a room or sitting and just being this sort of pumped up guy, he projects very little sexuality even with her, and she's kind of gyrating around him trying to get his money and stuff, but mostly their relationship is platonic, and even when it turns towards potential, like maybe they have a chance to sort of find each other as two ships passing in the night, it isn't particularly sexual or physical, which I think is fascinating, because here's this
Mhm.
character who's by nature of being a version of an athlete, very physical, but all the same, what is going on with Randy is he's his own worst enemy, and I think it's interesting how, to your point about the sports movies and stuff like that, there's usually a great match that he has to work up for, and can he win, and can he come back and still have it, and that's what every Rocky movie is essentially, and
Yeah.
Creed was too,
And his
and
match
that's
in this is his suicide.
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And here it's his he's gonna, the ticker's gonna go, and he knows it, and yet he's gonna go out in a blaze of glory, because it's all he ever had. It's all he ever knew that was sort of joy, and he doesn't know how to become a boyfriend. He doesn't know how to become a father. He doesn't know how to become a person who just can be a regular Joe, finding a job and some satisfaction in just a hard-earned day's work. But he's his own worst enemy, and it's a tragedy, because he has chances in this movie to go in different directions, and he just can't choose them. I mean, I think it's a film that's, it's very funny too. It's, even though it's about professional wrestling, and to your point, Mike, Aronofsky wanted to do that. It's funny how little it's about wrestling. We never really see
Mhm.
too much of any match. In fact, it's usually the before or mostly the after, and like what happens after, like going into the locker room and now you're sore and here's the money, and you're, talking to somebody else about getting other drugs to help you get to the next one, or it's a lot of camera following him around, just kind of hulking about, as he goes from one sort of shuffling, shambling walk to one place to another, and none of them are very good stops, and we're just kind of tagging along watching his sad life. But I think he's a broken man, and it wants to be a movie about salvation, but he never finds it. And they even, the one thing I didn't like about the script is a little heavy on some of the religious metaphors. I mean, there's a
Hmm.
time when he's talking to Pam, and Robert Siegel is writing her, quoting Isaiah, and she goes, "Well, it's from the Passion of the Christ," which gets a big
Yeah.
laugh in the movie,
Yeah.
because it's not really from the Bible. She's quoting it from a movie she saw
Yeah.
probably on
I like
cable.
that scene because you're like, oh, she's smart. And you're like, oh no,
Yeah,
she's not.
yeah, right. But and even she talks about his hair is kind of Christ-like and all that. But
Yeah.
he doesn't see, if you will, if you are a religious person or not. But if there's signs that are telling him, here's your off ramp, here's your salvation, here's your vocation, here's how to get past your transgressions and all these other things, and he just can't do it.
Mhm.
He connects with his daughter, and then he screws up that, and she's had it, and Pam comes and says, "I want you, come with me now," and he could leave the ring. Nobody's going to give a shit. The 1,000 fans there, if there's that many at all, he'll never see again. It doesn't have to see again. And if they run into him in the grocery store or anywhere else, they'd probably be happy to see him. Like, "Oh, how come you left?" And, "Well, I wasn't feeling very good." "Oh, that's too bad." He just can't see it. So it's this film that kind of lulls you into, not only with the trailer, but sort of the beats of the story, thinking that he's going to turn it around and become better, and it will be a redemption story. But he's, dare I say, by his own hand, irredeemable.
Yeah. And we never get an idea of the kind of person he was or what he did because we feel bad for him, but the way his daughter hates him makes us question, well, what kind of person was he or is he? And
Right.
I think he rejects Cassidy or Pam uh because he just knows he's going to screw it up. and he
Yeah.
decides, you know what, before I screw up another relationship, before I break someone else's heart, it's like, you're too good for me. Find a better man with your kid. I deserve to be out here. I'm gonna die the way I want to, whether it's a highlight or you know, in a high sort of way, and literally like where he's. And I love that shot where he's above the ring on the ropes. It's like a magazine pose, but at the
Yeah.
same time, you can't really see his face. It's kind of silhouetted. It's sort of like
Right.
he's gonna
Right.
dive into hell or dive into the abyss, and you know.
Yeah. And you know, and I think in moments like that, you realize how sort of shallow he is, and maybe you can call him a coward or a man who's got no self worth or even self awareness, but the thing that he responds to is this sort of need to be this persona, which is not real. And wrestling isn't real either, at least with, you know, boxers or football players or whatever other sports stories there are. There's athleticism that is connected to an actual contest where wrestling is prefab and, you know,
Mhm.
obviously it's fake because we all know it is and they don't take bets on it. And you know, it's determined how you're going to do it, who's going to be the villain, who's going to be the winner of the match, et cetera, beforehand. So he's so self-delusional about even what he's doing. It's like, you're not an athlete. Yes, you have to have an athlete's body and keep physically fit because you get tossed around and you can't be pulling hamstrings and breaking bones and all that. But, you know, he's doing injury to him because he's well past his shelf date. But he just doesn't realize it. And I think ultimately, in some respects, and maybe this is why it kind of resonated when it did in this century, is we have become this social media world now where
Mhm.
everybody wants to live online. You know, we can't just enjoy a meal. We have to take pictures of it and use it as, you know, look at how good I'm eating tonight on Instagram and maybe shame somebody else or get them jealous of you. And, you know, thirst traps and all that kind of stuff. I mean, how many people are putting pictures of them on their summer vacations or whatever, you know, showing off their aerobicized body or their good legs or, you know, hey, I'm fit and blah, blah, blah. Or I'm here in this wonderful location at this nice hotel. Don't you wish you were me? And he
Mhm.
can't live outside of the world of celebrity. He
Mhm.
turns down a nice woman who, you know, is trying to connect with him, and he turns her down for one last sort of gasp of this crazy weird celebrity that he hasn't known for probably 25 years. And that's what he chooses. That's what people are choosing in the world now. They'd rather have a relationship with their followers or their fans than a flesh and blood human being who's sitting there saying, I'm here. I want you. Please come with me. And he turns her down when he leaps and dies, as we assume he does. And I think we know that's going to be the ultimate time. If it isn't this one necessarily, it'll be the next one. Uh, it could happen to a stupider person because he doesn't get it and he dies not getting it.
Yeah, that's the tragedy I think with a lot of other people in his position. I don't just mean wrestlers. Like there's a lot of people, you know, who the majority of this country are poor, and they wind up like Randy, and they wind up forgotten and beat up, and I think that's why this movie connects so much. But I mean, Randy's ego, you know, like you said, like he could have chosen human connection. Like when he speaks to Stephanie, his daughter, uh, he tells her, you know, I used to pretend like you didn't exist, you know, which basically means, you know, I chose my fame over you. And now that
Mhm,
he's lost it,
mhm.
he's trying to grab whatever human connection he has left. And does he learn from that? No, he doesn't learn. You know what? Maybe I should go off with Pam, and maybe we should have a life. No, instead he goes, no, I'm gonna die in the ring. But I think it's because he just knows he's gonna blow it all up. You know, if
Yeah.
he does it again. But
Well, and he's not really grown and matured. I mean, in some
yeah,
respects, I think fame keeps people children, or in this sort of weird fantasy state that is not real and it can't be sustained. But there they live in it. It's almost like they're playing cops and robbers or Barbie or dolls or whatever you want to call it, and yet it's their career that they're sort of playing with in this make believe sort of way. He's, you know, sitting there trying to, you know, make enough money to pay for the trailer and there's, a handful of fans who come to some of these things, and he's got these old VHS tapes, and this was when DVDs were everywhere, but he's handing out VHS tapes, which just a wonderful little commentary about how dated and out of date he is on everything, and he just never sees it. And the character of Pam is a little bit the cliche hooker with a heart of gold, if you will, where here she is, this beautiful, fit woman who's clearly pushing 50, and yet she's sexual and she's fit and she's also kind and seems like a loving person, and she goes shopping with him, and she's a fun person to she could be a pal to him, even if they weren't necessarily going to be boyfriend girlfriend, and he just doesn't see that either. He just can't see beyond him wanting to be living for the applause. It's funny, I just talked about the movie Sunset Boulevard and Mulholland Drive, which is also about fame, of course.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think one of the fascinating things about Sunset Boulevard, and it just won the Tony for Best Musical Revival, is that Norma Desmond is rich and she's got this big mansion, and she could just live there and enjoy being one of the richest people in that town. She probably built that city with her silent film career and all that, but she's miserable because she wants that fame. And
Mm-hmm.
once I think some of these people taste it, they don't know what to do with it. That's why I think so many child stars and so many ex-athletes kind of burn out and don't know what they're doing. I think it's interesting that, OJ didn't really get sort of nabbed by, his, homicidal tendencies, but it was him trying to get back some of his memorabilia, his celebrity status, if you will, that he felt was stolen by somebody who was supposed to be giving him more of a cut of his glory in the world of fandom and people wanting autographs and tchotchkes and remembrances. It's all kind of connected. Norma Desmond, O.J. Simpson, Randy the Ram Robinson, these people can't relinquish the limelight or the spotlight, and they do terrible things because of it.
Yeah. And it's fun. By the way, subscribe to YPA Review so we can get more clicks and we can become more famous.
There you go.
Yeah, but
that big house.
Yeah, but I mean, we're all trying to become famous, and like you were saying with social media, it's sort of a thing now where everyone is becoming famous, and this is sort of a movie that kind of gives you a life lesson as to, okay, what happens when you can no longer generate clicks? What happens when you're no longer relevant? How do you adjust to life? And this movie is a life lesson as to, this is why our parents tell us, yeah, great, you want to be an actor, but also go to business school. Go learn how to do marketing, do something that actually can make you money. Don't just sit around and think that this is going to carry you your whole life. And everyone thinks they're going to be an Academy Award winner. Everyone thinks, oh no, one day I'll blow up. And it's like, no, this is what happens. You wind up like Randy, living in your van. Well, hopefully not that bad, but a lot of people wind up in his case. And I think that's why this movie's so resonant. I mean, it really kind of just shows the dark side of the American dream, because everyone thinks they can go out and they can accomplish and they can blow up, or they can fall out of relevancy like Randy. And there's no better scene showing how he's irrelevant is like when he's playing like an old Nintendo game, and the kid's like, "Have you ever heard of Call of Duty 4?" And he's like, "What's that?" And it's like, this is what happens.
Yeah, he's out of date on every level here, and then he's out of date when he doesn't want to date Pam, who's such a a lovely young lady, and willing to be there for him. Well, not young lady anymore. She's got a kid as well. But it's funny, Mike. I know we were both just at the movie Materialist this last week, and I think an interesting message in that film that's similar to the one here is all of the toys and all of the money and all of the things, as George Carlin used to say, things to keep my stuff, places to keep my stuff, all the stuff we can accumulate. It's nice for a while, and certainly a lot of people enjoy the boat or the car or the house or the second home or the 3 vacations or the week, the yearly sojourns to Vail or something like that. But when it really boils down to what you have to show for your life is, do you like yourself? Do you have people who you like within your world or love, and people love you? As the wizard said, and remember, my sentimental friend, a heart is judged not by how much you love, but how much you are loved by others. And that's kind of what the point of the materialist is, as well as the wrestler, is. Do you have anybody to go home at night to hold and to talk to who wants to be with you? That's the Lamborghini. That's the Academy Award. That's the real thing that you should be striving for, is, does somebody want you? Does somebody need you? Is there somebody waiting for you? Or at the very least, do you like yourself? Even if you're like, hey, maybe people are widows or divorced, or they don't necessarily have a significant other, but do you have time with yourself that you can enjoy and like, and not torture yourself? I mean, my God, Randy still thinks he's a 25-year-old man, and he's having to do all these terrible injections that cause him all kinds of problems, and ringing in his ears and spells and heart problems. He doesn't even like who he is with himself, let alone have any other people who like him for who he really is, without the sequined, capes and the multicolored leotards and shit. It's so silly, but none of that is real. None of that is the real game or the goal, and yet he can't see anything but that.
Yeah, he kind of has like an old mindset when it comes to his relationship with Pam, because his mindset is, well, we should date. And it's like, well, she can just be your friend, but it's kind of in that old kind of male sort of mindset of, oh no, woman, they're only partners and they're not friends. And I think that's kind of where his brain is stuck. And that's why he can't really develop a friendship with her, even when she comes rushing to his aid. And
yeah, that's true. Yeah. And I think he objectifies her in a little bit of way. Like, he needs her to help him shop for his daughter because he doesn't know women. And so he needs the cliche woman to, the mother who can help him sort of as like a, the insight, because he can't think for himself, or has no experience with dealing with women other than, she's a stripper, or it's the cliche role where girls know girls and I can't understand them, or what they would want as far as a gift or something. Yeah, he's got a lot of old world ways of thinking, not just with the wrong video console. And ultimately, he just can't get out of it. He's stuck in the past, in his own mind, and in attempting to keep his body like it was, as well as all the memories and connecting to the career that, even, I mean, I've always thought it must be interesting to be a professional athlete when you get to be 35, basically, when most people sort of probably start hitting their stride in whatever job they have. Because, when you're in your 20s, you're first learning stuff, and you're not necessarily getting into the higher levels of pay and management or different things like that as you go up whatever ladder it is. But when you're 35, most people, that's when they kind of start like, okay, now I'm kind of going into this next phase where hopefully I can ride that for the next 10, 15, 20 years. And then maybe, you get married or have a family and stuff like that. But athletes, they're done at 35. Most of them are done. And what do you do after that? You've got 45 more years left to live potentially. And the best years are behind you. And if you haven't set up anything else to do, you're just going to sit there and be like the high school quarterback who never went to college and sits on the bar recounting, his great victories on the gridiron during senior year of high school and never gets past that. And that's kind of what Randy Robinson is.
Yeah, well, he's a guy who's not very educated. He doesn't really have a lot that he can offer to other people. And he ends up sort of living in this past glory because he probably worked for an organization that didn't pay him very much. I watched this whole report from John Oliver about how the WWE doesn't really they only give their athletes annual doctor visitations. They only cover for their health care when they get injured. They like hardly any of them get any retirement or benefits. A lot of them wind up being broke like Randy. There's actually a clip from a character from Always Sunny in Philadelphia who's he's played by Roddy Piper, who I think he was in They Live.
And, that's right. Roddy Piper. Yep.
Yeah. and he ended up dying, I think, when he was like 61 or something like that. He said he wouldn't live to 65, and I don't know what happened with his life, but they like when I was reading the reports on how the reception this movie got, like he saw the film and he just broke down into tears.
Yeah.
And I think it's because there's a lot of people like all these cliches exist: the stripper, the estranged daughter, because all these ex wrestlers from their research found out they have estranged children and strippers that is their only relationship, their only go-to, because they've either burned every bridge or they've been ripped off or both. And I like to imagine that Randy was someone who was very wealthy, and because he was the video game character on that game, he had his own
Yeah,
action
the
figure.
action figure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Like he like I don't know if he was like Hulk Hogan level, but he could have been that. And you wonder at a certain point, was it because he would just sleep around with other women and ignore his daughter, and that's why like they ended up estranged? Like whatever had they never even addressed his wife or what happened to her.
Yeah, there's a
And
lot that's inferred in the film, and
yeah.
I think you just see whatever it is has worn him down, and he carries it around almost like it is, to strike at the Christ metaphor here, like carrying around this cross or this burden to bear. But yeah, my guess is that in his day he was probably a pretty shitty guy, probably arrogant, probably was thinking that he was God's gift and women were his playthings, and he probably threw his money around on drugs and women, and wasn't a good man to a good husband to his wife, and certainly a shitty father to his daughter. And then when all that goes away and he doesn't have anybody left at night, as we've talked about already, then suddenly he's doing some self-examination and realizing he has to do something different. But it's funny too, like even here where they show him, and it's a little bit easy, but I can see it because he's probably capable of getting a better job than being, the guy who's slicing the meat back in the deli, though that's a good job. I mean, those kind of jobs can pay very well, and butchers and stuff like that. If he had invested some of his money and gone to, even a year's worth of a technical school and found a trade, he could have been a happy person and made six figures. But he's too arrogant to do that. And he's taking the shitty job that he feels is beneath him because he doesn't want to give any real time and attention and effort to something that could better him, because he's still living in his laurels, thinking that somehow he's going to come back, or it's going to be enough to sustain him. And so he chooses a role that is his own self-fulfilling prophecy. Of course he's demeaned and treated like shit because he's put himself in that position to be treated badly. But as you watch this, it's amazing that you feel so much for him, because he is trying on some levels, and I think both Aronofsky and especially, of course, Rourke put a lot of pathos and moments of vulnerability, and he never is very loud, and he kind of is always sort of talking down here, and his head's hung down low a lot, and he doesn't really do much puffery as far as making him act arrogant. Even when he's backstage or in the locker room with his fellow wrestlers, he's pretty humble pie and calm and quiet about all that. And yet the proof is in his actions. Even though he seems like a sweet guy, and he's not even handsy with Pam, he can't get past his own need to be a star, and it just makes him make all these terrible decisions. And ultimately, I think the pity starts to wane a little bit. I mean, I felt bad for him, but only so far. And I think that's what makes it fascinating too, is here is this protagonist who in some respects is his own antagonist. And ultimately you end up giving up on him the way Pam did, the way his daughter does, because he just doesn't see it.
Yeah, he's like you said, he's a self-fulfilling bullshit prophecy. He's someone who I think he gives into his impulsivity because he sort of wants to continue to punish himself, but he doesn't know it.
Right.
When he's supposed to have dinner with his daughter, what does he do? He ends up doing a bunch of blow and having sex with some girl from a bar. And then he completely forgets about having dinner with him, and he screws it up. Now, did he mean to do that? Of course not, but he can't control himself. When he quits his job, he doesn't, quietly leave or anything like that. He wants to make a big show out of it. So he punches his hand through the slicer, bleeds all over everyone and
Mhm.
causes a huge scene, intentionally. Uh, but and what triggered that was the guy who was at the counter saying, "Oh, you used to be Randy Robinson. Oh my
Yeah.
God, I used to remember you." And it just comes rushing back to, and immediately he's like, "Okay, I'm gonna go in the ring. I'm gonna die." I think the moment where he kind of realizes he's gonna end it is like when he tries to kiss Pam and then she rejects him. Although she comes back, he already starts that little cycle in his head, going, "Oh, I'm gonna screw it up. Just forget me. I have no chance." And then that's when he starts running away from Pam when she's trying to give him connection,
Right.
and like, even when his daughter gives him a chance, he runs away from her and he goes towards the girl who, because she loved him when he was famous, and it was like, yeah, I'm famous again. I'm having sex with a hooker, with a girl, and I'm doing blow. This is awesome, and it's like that's part of the human condition. We all want to be super popular. We all like materialists. Like we all want to have the big mansion. We want to have, the trophy husband or the trophy wife. And when we can't get that and reality starts setting in for us, like Randy, some of us end up just destroying ourselves and not being able to see an alternative, compromised life that can give us happiness, because the only time Randy starts to feel happy is like in the middle act where he is starting to reconnect with his daughter, where the doctor told him he can't wrestle anymore. And when he really tries to stop wrestling, and tries to put a life
Mhm.
together, it starts working out. But then he goes towards the fame again in the end. Once that guy says, "Are you Randy?" and bam, that's
Yep.
it.
Well, you made a great point there too, Mike. That he kind of makes everything into a show. It's because the show is the only thing he knows. You were putting on a show, putting on this act, putting on this performance, and he starts to believe that that's the only thing that matters. And to your point, if he can't be in the ring, if he can't be famous there, he's going to put on the show elsewhere, whether he realizes it or not. When he is making that exit from the grocery store and he's, doing the trashing of various aisles and bleeding all over the cleanup on aisle 3. It's a show performance.
Mhm.
He's almost acting out the way he would, like, before the show when you are interviewed by the sportscaster during a wrestling match, and you kind of do all the bluster and I'm going to rip you apart and then all that kind of stuff. It becomes this performance in a way of him, his acting out, his playing these things. Even to your point, when he has an opportunity to connect with somebody with physical intimacy and maybe something that numbs the pain, it's the showy version of those. Meditation or calming yourself down or just simply laying down and relaxing are a much better way to sort of self-medicate than doing artificial cocaine and getting hyped up on that, which is a real problem. Or, he could have had intimacy with Pam and maybe the two of them would have made love for the first time in a long, long time, but he wants to fuck, pardon my French, but this is what he's doing because he's high on cocaine. And this is like when he was a celebrity and the groupies are hanging out at the door and he gets to go home with a different woman every night after the match. And that isn't intimacy. That isn't real, but that's part of the show. I am a celebrity in the spotlight, living in the show. And I think we see that with, a lot of people in politics today. I think it happens with child stars who just can't get off that. It's why they keep coming back to these reality shows and going on Survivor or going on these, reality programs, because all those Bachelor people who come back, it's like, if you want love, go out and find real people in a job or clubs or your church or, groups that have book clubs and such. But no, we're going to go down to paradise and have 60 cameras around us all the time, because that's where I'll find real love and a real relationship. But it's like Warren Beatty told Madonna in the Truth or Dare documentary that she can't live off camera. She's so used to being in the spotlight that she just doesn't want to live off camera. She's even going to go see her doctor about some problems, and she's going to film all that, even though it's this personal intimate, sort of vulnerable thing between her and her doctor. But let's film it. And Randy got the taste of that fame, and he just can't get that taste out of his mouth, and he wants more of it. It's his addiction. His addiction isn't cocaine. It isn't steroids. It isn't even sort of the fun of the sport or the camaraderie of his fellow wrestlers. It's the applause. It's that spotlight. It's that center ring that he is the one guy which 500 to 1,000 people are all watching. That's what his drug is, and it ends up killing him because he can't do it, and it's a cruel master. Well, I also want to say too, let me ask you this, because I was thinking about this when preparing for Mike. I'm not saying that Pam is the same as Randy, but I wonder too, when he rejected her by choosing the thing, she probably went back to stripping. My guess that she might have returned to her comfort zone too, because that's the way she knows how to make money. And we always tend to go back to things that work for us when we venture out and try things and put our ass on the line and get rejected. We'll go back to things that made us feel good and stuff. That may be where she feels her most sense of control or power too, because obviously, as any porn star, prostitute, stripper, it's all about they're in control. It's a way of them sort of taking back their physicality, maybe that was stolen by a perverted uncle or just sexist society, whatever you want to call it. But it's a strange way of doing it, but they feel that it's them calling the shots and being powerful. And in some respects, that's true. I mean, you can't touch the stripper. She can touch you, but you can't do anything with her. So she's in charge of all those dances, and she's easily parting you from hundreds of dollars. She may have gone back to that too, because I think in some respects, at her age, with a mom and a woman, getting close to her mid-40s at least, still doing that, she may feel the need for some sort of fame or control or sense of self that's elevated beyond what normally people would gravitate towards. But because she's also kind of a star at that club, that's a little bit of the same foibles and probably problems that Randy has, that she maybe shares too.
Yeah, and there's a similarity between a stripper and a wrestler that the movie's drawing parallels to. Is both dress up in costumes, both of which show a lot of their skin. Both you don't use their real names,
right?
And when you do find out their real names, it's kind of like a reality hitting you sort of situation. Because when Cassidy's leaving the club, her manager keeps going, Cassidy, and then he goes, Pam, and then you go, oh, okay, so that's her name.
Yeah.
And then when Randy is like, after he storms out of the grocery store and makes his whole scene, he's sitting in the car and he's going, it's Robin. Like he's saying, I don't want you to use my real name or my stage name in front of all these people. Just call me Robin.
Well, and to the parallels too. I mean, I think that was what the Academy Award-winning film Menorah was about, is that whole movie is kind of her wake up call about what is reality. And even though she is in charge and it's a fake name and she's in control and she's pretending like I'm your girlfriend for a night, and we can walk right over there and get money at the ATM. She's all in charge and everything else, and she doesn't like these people that much or care about them, but for the $1,000 that I'll clear out of your wallet and the half hour it takes me to do that, I'll make you think I'm your girlfriend and I really like you. And then that's artificial too. Same with Pam and what she's doing in her profession. But, then in Menorah, I think, she got the wake up call that marriage was never real. And it's even worse than she probably deep down knew it was already, but it turns into this really ugly personification of how tragically it went off the rails. I think Randy and Pam and Annie or Honora, all are sort of living a world of illusion that they should know better, because they're the master of ceremonies of the illusion. And yet, in some respects, the most fooled person isn't their client or the audience; it is themselves. And that's the tragedy of the wake-up call for all three of those, I think, in sort of their stories and narratives here.
Yeah, this movie's a very sort of like anti-fame film because
Yeah.
most movies you would have maybe Randy rising up again or becoming popular again or just something ridiculous like that
Mhm.
or redeeming himself. And this movie is the opposite. This movie is about the consequences of when you try to strive towards superficial values rather than real human connection. And it's a movie that um, it's really if I'm gonna check my notes here so I don't get stuck on here. You know, it's a movie that relates to Aronofsky's movies about burnouts. He
Right.
kind of likes to like Requiem for a Dream is about a bunch of drug addicts who can't get their life together. The Whale was a movie that one was similar to The Wrestler, not where it's about not like a guy who was once famous or something like that, but someone whose life has just completely fallen apart and this is their
Right.
final days.
Mhm.
Although I will say The Whale, that one was a little too melodramatic for me. I like I liked it when I initially saw it, but then I saw it
Mhm.
again and I just
Mhm.
went, yeah, there's just too many moments where they're just hamming it up for the Oscar. When Brendan Fraser in the trailer is going, I just want one moment where I matter.
Yeah,
I'm just
yeah.
going, oh, come on here. But and that one was the opposite, where actually the actor won the Oscar in a comeback
Right.
performance to that.
Right.
And it wasn't like Mickey Rourke where he lost to Sean Penn, who, yeah, when I saw Life and Times of Harvey Milk, I saw that after seeing Milk, and I went, wow, Sean Penn sounds absolutely nothing like Harvey Milk when I watched
Yeah.
that movie. He kind of just played like a stereotypical gay guy in it. It was weird. But yeah.
Well, to your point about Aronofsky's sort of resume, I think clearly he thinks that these characters who don't have it or are kind of getting the the fuzzy end of the lollipop are more interesting as characters. And what do you do with those people? And I think he's drawn to those characters. I think he's drawn to stories where there isn't the typical sort of comeback or rejuvenation or those kind of things. I think his most successful movie for me from start to finish, and maybe because it's about somebody who actually is in their prime and she's trying to navigate the arts as well as the fame and sort of all the craziness that comes with the competitive world of ballet, is Black Swan. She is maybe a little bit long in the tooth. Mila Kunis is the young upstart who's probably a number of years younger than she is, and she's got to watch her back because of that. But still, she is a professional ballerina, and that means she's an accomplished talent. And to be able to dance with any company, especially one in New York like she is doing, means that she is good. She is a real athlete, if you will, and an artist and accomplished. And yet she's also her own worst enemy, and she lets it all get to her, and she can't enjoy it. I think in some respects, what maybe is a thread of in a lot of this is the things that they're supposed to enjoy, even in Requiem for a Dream, drugs, right? Ideally, we're
Mhm.
supposed to enjoy them. They're recreational. They're making us feel better. And they turn into these nooses around their neck. The very thing that they're searching for, hungering for, living and striving for, ends up being, in some respects, their devil,
Mhm.
their death, uh, you know, uh, their specter haunting them with the
Mhm.
sickle, who's like in the seventh seal. Like, do you want to play chess? Um, they ruin themselves, and they just can't get out of this ruin of themselves through this obsession. And I think that's the other thing that Aronofsky's always dealing with, is obsessiveness. Very few things are worth being obsessive about. I don't know that there really is anything worth being obsessive about. You can say, well, I'm obsessive about style or great food or seeing the world. That's
Or
all there.
movies. Yeah.
Or whatever, or movies. But I mean, even with us, it's we have to be a certain amount of cynical about even writing about movies. And
Yeah.
do critics matter that much? On some level, yes. And we have
Yeah.
friends and followers, and it's I mean, the good thing is you and I have picked something that we would be doing as a hobby anyhow, and if we get something else out of it, that's great. But those are our interests, and it's fun, and I enjoy most of that completely. But when it becomes obsession, when it becomes uh, destructive, that's
Yeah.
when you have to start saying, maybe I need to step back a little bit. And I think in all of his Aronofsky's films, these characters cannot step back, and they medicate with their obsessiveness, and it turns them into, you know, physical shells of their former self, or racked with pain, or, you know, sort of continuing to put their body in harm's way, where death and demise is definitely a possibility every day.
Yeah, and even Randy's profession of wrestling itself is, in a way, sort of like a self-punishment,
Yeah,
because
that's
he's
right.
constantly, getting hurt. And when they said this movie was going to be The Wrestler, I just, all I've seen with wrestling since I was growing up was WWE and stuff like that. And I'm like, oh, well, that's fake. Or if it was like real wrestling, it wouldn't be as interesting, because real wrestling is just someone like pinning someone else on the mat until they give
It's
it a
very
submission.
structured.
Yeah, yeah, it's very, very different. And with this film, you really saw how, yeah, it might, like, the winner is predetermined,
Right.
but the pain they put themselves through is enormous, because professional wrestlers, they put their bodies probably through more than any other athletes. It's just that, the it's just that the profession might not have an unpredictable outcome, where with wrestling, when your body hits that mat, that hurts a lot
Yeah.
and it breaks bones. And here, not only are we seeing Randy getting pushed on the mat, we're seeing like glass like getting broken against him. This is the first time I ever learned about a wrestler cutting themselves in the
Yeah.
forehead, which
Yeah.
Mickey Rourke actually did. That wasn't fake. And there's sort of like, even when he's cutting himself, it's sort of like, not to be religious, but it is sort of like Jesus getting whipped and carrying the cross, and like when he's going up that ladder and he's falling, that's him coming back,
Right.
but not
Yeah, that's right.
resurrecting.
No, I
Yeah.
mean, and then that's a little on the nose in certain places more than others here. But I think at the very least, I think he has a little bit of a Christ complex himself, not necessarily saying the script has as much of one, though it does a little bit with those metaphors and references and stuff. But Randy does. He's suffering for his art. He's taking this pain because it's about his need to do it, and this is him doing it for the greater good, or whatever, things like that. Christ dying for our sins, he's taking this punishment for the greater good of the audience and their appreciation. By the way, when I was growing up, they used to have wrestling magazines when wrestling was not
Mhm.
quite the WWE Hollywood show that it was from Vince McMahon and company. And invariably, almost every cover of the wrestling magazines that they used to sell on the newsstand had somebody bleeding, because
Mm.
blood always sells. It
Yeah.
sells in thrillers and mysteries. It sells on the news at night. If it bleeds, it leads is always the watchwords for local stories. And it was a big thing in wrestling. And that also ages Randy, because that's such the old style of doing it. When you watch the WWE, if there is blood, it's usually an accident, probably because it's
Mhm.
considered not family fare then. It's too violent for the kiddies. And WWE, if one thing they did brilliantly, is market it for all family, and it's just sort of silliness. But yeah, again, it's a nasty commentary about obsession and fame and self-delusion, and yet it's a great drama to watch, albeit one that is heartbreaking as well as frustrating, because these people don't learn.
Yeah. That's the saddest thing, and most people end up not, well, I would say half people learn, half people don't. Like, we'll keep
Well,
it
the funny thing
there.
in movies, somebody learns, right? That's the arc of the thing. It's
Yeah.
very rare that a character stays stagnant or
Mhm.
static, doesn't evolve and learn something. Even, if he gets the golden fleece or whatever the adventure is, he has to change somehow in that journey to get this prize. Where here, he has all these opportunities to learn and sort of evolve, and he just keeps backpedaling,
Yeah.
and doesn't get those extra chances that he shouldn't get, because he screwed up the daughter again. He screwed up with Pam and screwed up his physical career and everything else. It's
Yeah.
inevitable. He's going to destroy himself, and he's doing everything here in the story to do so.
Yeah, yeah. There's, I mean, at the end of the day, no one can really help you but yourself. And he really had a chance after the doctor gave him the news and he started to pick things up, but then he decided to sort of regress towards his former glories. And I really
Mhm.
love that opening credit scene too, where they just pan across all the posters. It's not
Yeah,
like a big montage of old clips or things like that, like most movies would do. It's kind of like you're looking at someone's wall.
yeah.
It's like,
But it gives
okay,
you a sense of, oh, this is who
yeah,
this character is, and he
yeah,
keeps these as mementos, and it gives us a little bit of the background of him too, done in a matter of seconds without having to, do some sort of pseudo documentary. Like, here we are on WNBA or NBE local
yeah.
news. Whatever happened to Randy the Ram Robinson? Well, he started out, oh, I get it.
Oh,
They're finding a
yeah,
way to tell me all this exposition,
yeah.
but just the pan of those posters kind of tells you all you need to know.
Yeah, it kind of outdid Rocky Balboa when Rocky Balboa came out because they kind of did that whole montagey thing of what happened
Yeah.
to him, and although all those movies kind of did that, and I kind of like how this movie really is sort of like the anti. It's one of the sports movies I like because most sports movies are inspirational. That's fine, but
Mhm.
after a period of time, you could just see how false it is, and teams win, but it's bullshit. And this movie goes for
Yeah.
something deeper. It's really about how there are self-destructive people out there, not just who become famous, but who always want to be famous
Mhm.
and who can't really
Mhm.
handle life when life comes crashing down on them. And
Right. Right.
Randy's a reflection of a lot of people who struggle with that.
Yep.
Yeah, but Jeff, I think we're gonna give this movie a final rating, and then we'll take it from there. So, out of 4 Guinnesses, what would you give this movie?
I think it would probably be by sort of a little bit of distance from it. I think I would give this one probably 3. I think it's
Okay.
good to maybe very good potentially, but I like it a lot, and I think it's very well acted, and it's a sort of unique take on the sports story, uh, but a very dark and sad one. So at least 3 stars or 3 Guinnesses.
Yeah, I'm gonna go full 4 with this
Oh,
one
okay.
because the moment I saw this film, I loved it, and I loved it because I was a Darren Aronofsky fan at the time.
Yeah, yeah.
I was introduced to Requiem for a Dream, and then I watched Pi, and The Fountain. I was kind of like mixed about it, but I kind of went out of my way to the theater to
Hmm.
see it, and it looked spectacular on the big screen. But that one was kind of a disappointment. But when I saw The Wrestler, it was something so different from him. It was a
Hmm.
slow moving, pseudo
Hmm.
documentary,
Hmm.
reflective story about not just people who want to become famous, but people who really don't set real goals for their life and
Hmm.
what happens when they can't handle the fact that now they're approaching their 40s or their 50s or their 60s and there's not much left for them. And Randy kind of represents the everyman, except hopefully every man isn't as self-destructive as they are,
Right,
as
right.
or as he is. But there are people out there like that, and he reminded me of a lot of folks that I knew, and I think that, and it really showed a side of wrestling I never saw before, where it's like it's not just fake, like this is a real sport, even if it is predetermined.
Yeah, and I mean
Yeah.
they train as athletes, and they have to be
Yeah.
careful because they can hurt themselves. And to your point, it is painful, and they are throwing each other around, and there's body contact and all that, and it's a lot of energy and a lot of nonstop movement. So yeah, they train as athletes, even though it isn't necessarily a real sport. But what it is it is a version of celebrity that asks a little bit too much of people, and then
Mhm.
you sort of like people like Randy and other celebrities out there, they give into it, and it overtakes them.
Yeah, yeah, because I mean, all those years of all that physical training and all that slamming of because you have to look like a glad because you're like you're almost like naked half the time.
Yeah,
Like even football players probably like that. Well, they end up getting horrible brain injuries through
sure.
through their sport.
But I mean, it's funny too,
yeah.
because at any moment you can hurt and twist something and then you're done. And
Yeah.
so there's a risk no matter what your field or
Mhm.
battleground is. It's very dangerous. And, as you get older, it becomes more and more difficult to navigate. And Randy didn't learn that lesson.
Yeah, and unfortunately, a lot of them don't. They
You
wind
stay
up on
away.
drugs and
Yeah.
oof, yeah. But
Stay too long at the dance.
yeah. But Jeff, thanks for coming on.
My
You can
pleasure.
check out his stuff at theestablishingshot.org and on TikTok and Twitter, or X, I should say. See, I'm becoming irrelevant like Randy.
No, that's okay. We're
Is,
both
is
on
it?
TikTok. I'm Jeff York Chicago there.
Yeah.
I'm Jeff York Chicago on Instagram. And I also write a couple of essays almost every month for Pipeline Artist Magazine, which is an artist's uh, sort of online examination of all different kinds of things in the arts. And I write about movies and television there. So, and I love being a guest on your show, Mike. So thank you for having me.
I always love having you on. And
You're
if
very
you could,
kind.
if you ever like to check my stuff out, go to ypareviews.com. Or if you're on TikTok, you can go to YPA Review Chicago and see some clips from us there. And the YPA stands for You'll Probably Agree. You can also find us on YouTube, which maybe you're watching it on YouTube right here. You just click that little subscribe button. All right, guys, thanks a lot, and we'll see you in the ring.